The Oscar for the Best Animated Movie of 2009 went to the Pixar movie Up. Anyone seen it? I see a few smiles. Okay, it's a good movie. It's the story of 78-year-old Carl Fredricksen, who was recently widowed, and he decides to take the trip that he and his wife had always dreamed of, to Paradise Falls, somewhere in South America. Developers are encroaching on his house. The rest of his neighbors have already sold out and moved away. And so he blows up enough helium balloons to lift his house up off its foundation and flies in it to South America. The only problem is that he accidentally takes along a young stowaway, 8-year-old Russell, who had come knocking on his door to see if he could help Carl. And in their adventures in South America seeking Paradise Falls, they meet a talking dog. This is a Disney movie, after all. So it's a talking dog named Doug. Doug belongs to a pack of dogs who all have special collars that translate the dog's thoughts into speech. And as you might imagine from a dog, Doug's first lines in the movie are, "My name is Doug. I have just met you and I love you." And then he explains how he can talk. "My master made me this collar. He is good and a smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may speak. Squirrel! My master is good and smart." The distraction of a squirrel. Oh, I brought one. Speaking of distractions and squirrels, I brought a squirrel. The distraction of a squirrel. It becomes a running joke throughout the rest of the movie, as the dogs are periodically distracted by a squirrel sighting. Part of why this is funny is that's how dogs are. Our dog will lie calmly out in the backyard here, enjoying the sunshine, until she suddenly sees or smells a squirrel, or a rabbit, or Mr. Midweek's dogs come out in their yard, and off she will go, running faster than you would think she could for her age. Squirrel! And the other reason it's funny is because that's how we human beings are as well. For better or worse, we've become a very distracted people, and anything can become a distraction. A noise, a phone call, TV, news, something else that catches our attention other than what we are paying attention to start with. Like the sound of the car, yes. There's even a name for this now, actually, called continuous partial attention. It was coined in 1998 by an author and computer consultant named Linda Stone. She says it's the process of paying simultaneous attention to a number of sources of incoming information, but all at a superficial level. We live in a time of such continuous change. I think we've started watching and waiting for the next thing to come along and only partly paying attention to the thing that's here now. It's like we're living on edge constantly. Martha, in our gospel lesson, isn't on edge because she's waiting for the next thing to come. Jesus is already there, sitting in her living room. She's on edge and can't pay attention to him because she's working on all the preparations for having guests. Everything's not ready yet. The food's not ready. The beds don't have clean sheets on them yet. The table hasn't been set. The bread hasn't gone in the oven. There's still sweeping and dusting and vacuuming that needs to happen. And Martha has become so overwhelmed by all this that she's even rude to her guest. She says, "Jesus, I know you just got here, but can't you make my sister help me? I want this all to be great for you, Jesus, so make Mary help me." And Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you're worried and distracted by many things." To be distracted is to be unable to concentrate because your mind is preoccupied. Martha cannot focus on her guest, on the main event, because she is so preoccupied by the preparations. How many times has that happened to us? We get so overwhelmed by everything that needs to be done for vacation that I start talking faster too, sorry. We get so overwhelmed by everything that needs to be done to go on vacation, and then to the point that we don't enjoy the vacation as much as we might have otherwise. Or so worried we want everything to be just right for a special visitor that we have a hard time stopping being worried in order to enjoy that visitor's company. And if we are distracted as a people, if our attention spans are dwindling, and we're having more trouble concentrating on one thing because we're preoccupied, what are we preoccupied by? And why are we preoccupied? Gadgets, technology, bad news, health problems. If our attention isn't fully here, where else is it? In the doctor's office? With family? In the past? Daydreaming? You all know that my number one distraction If I'm distracted, it's most likely because of my kids. When you're distracted, where else is your attention? And I find that I'm also more distracted when I'm more tired. When I'm more worn out, then I'm more likely to get distracted because I'm having trouble focusing in the first place because I just need rest. When we don't get enough sleep, when we deal with chronic pain, we are more irritable and more grouchy and more distracted. So how do we move past our squirrels? How do we move past our distractions? I think first, if you're preoccupied with something, then go ahead and stop and deal with it. Occupy yourself with whatever is preoccupying you. Take care of it so that you can move on. Being occupied is good. Work is good. Martha's problem isn't that she's busy. Her problem is that she's preoccupied by her busyness to the point of being overwhelmed and lashing out at others, like her sister and Jesus. Martha's at the point where she just needs to decide just how much more absolutely has to get done and do it, and then sit down and join Mary at Jesus' feet. You've been thinking about calling the doctor about something? Like the Nike slogan, just do it and quit thinking about it. If you don't wake up feeling refreshed, figure out how to sleep better. Your chronic pain is making you angry with the world? Call your doctor and get better pain management. You're worried about your family? Call them, visit them, do something nice for them, pray for them. And then decide you're going to quit worrying. Once you've done all you can do, let it go. That song from the Frozen movie, if you look at the lyrics itself, it's actually about Elsa turning her back on her family and friends, saying, let it go, slam the door. I'm moving on over here to let my ice powers run wild without worrying about hurting anyone. And I'm not talking about turning your back on your family or ignoring your health or anything like that. I'm talking about ignoring your worries once you've dealt with them. If you have your grocery list running through your head right now during church, please, by all means, write it down in your bulletin so that then you can stop thinking about it and refocus your attention back on God. Deal with your worries so that you're occupied by them now and not preoccupied by them later. Second, occupying yourself with something means that you're focusing your attention and not being distracted. It means you're present in the moment. You're not thinking about the past or the future, but being present now. For most of us, this has to be a conscious choice, especially if we're by ourselves. The easiest, quickest way for me to make myself be present is to get down on the floor and play with my kids. But I know that's not always an option for all of us. And so we have to figure out sometimes how to make ourselves focus on what's before us. Put away and minimize distractions, whether that means turning off the TV, intentionally not reaching for another book or another screen or another item, and focusing your eyes on one object only, to bring your attention to just one thing. I'm a visual person, and during worship, when I can, which I know is not now, when I can, I like to focus on the flame of the candle. And so you may often notice during prayer time or the prelude or other times, when I'm looking up here, what I'm looking at is that candle, that flame on that candle. Being present is a conscious choice. And contrary to the media and internet and New York City, who never sleeps, we don't have to be available 24/7. I put my cell phone on silent or vibrate overnight, starting with when the kids go to bed. And I don't turn the volume back up until everyone's awake in the morning. I still try to check it from time to time before I go to bed. And when it's on vibrate, it sometimes still wakes me up. But we don't actually have to be available to the world 24/7. If you're having trouble and are easily distracted, then intentionally limit your distractions and figure out how to intentionally make yourself present where you are. Finally, Jesus tells Martha that only one thing is needed. Only one thing. Out of all your preoccupations and worries and distractions, only one thing is needed. And what's the one thing? Jesus. The only thing we need is Jesus. Martha had him right there in her house, and she wasn't paying attention to him. She knew he was there, but she thought all those preparations were what was needed. When what was really needed was for her to come and sit at his feet. The one thing needed wasn't cleaning or cooking or doing good deeds. The one thing needed is nurturing your relationship with God. Not just having a relationship with Jesus, but spending time with him, listening to him, making him your first priority in your life, before anything or anyone else. In other words, worship comes before work. If you need to start scheduling time, if you've gotten away from it, I'd suggest perhaps when you first wake up in the morning, make it part of your morning routine. Or if every day is a little too often to start, perhaps come to our weekly prayer time. We're here Wednesday evenings at 7. We're here in the sanctuary. We leave the lights off because there's enough evening light coming in through the windows. It's really quite beautiful, and we can just sit and be still and calm our souls and know that God is God. That's the one thing that is needed. Spend time with God. Listen to him. And that's part of the thing about prayer, is that it's a conversation. It's a two-way street. It's not just us talking to God, but also listening to what God has to say to us. And all those other distractions and worries, it's time to put them in their place and say, no more. No more are they going to keep me from God. No more are they going to keep me from church. No more are they going to keep me from listening to the one who created me. Deal with the worries that are serious and need dealing with. Focus on one thing at a time. You know, there's studies coming out now that say that multitasking is not necessarily a good thing. We can get more done when we multitask, but we don't do each thing as well as if we just did one item at a time. Make your first thing time with God. And then the rest of your day, you can be present in each activity, where you are. Where we are now this morning is worship. If you are distracted and preoccupied by many things, write down your grocery list on your bulletin. Trust you will see the squirrel when it's important to see the squirrel. And come, let us worship our Lord. Amen.